My guest today is a man very well known to this channel, the very well respected, well regarded economist, Kevin Lings. Kevin, it's very nice to be here. If there is a little bit of noise in the background, I believe there's a Christmas party taking place or a year-end party. We haven't been invited to it. Regardless, we'll carry on, a little envious. Kevin, one question bothers me. You've been in economics a long time. You were with JP Morgan, Ned Bank. You've been with Stanley for well over 10 years. You've written books, written journals, lectured. When you were a little boy at school, at primary school, and the teacher went round and said, Kevy, when you're old, what are you going to be? Did you say, I want to be an economist?
I had no idea what economics was about. Not at all. It wasn't. And even when I was studying, it wasn't in my mind. I was studying to be an accountant. People said, become a chartered accountant. It's a good idea. So the whole way through school, I kind of focused on finance. So all I knew was that I wanted to be in finance. And if you said to me, what was that? I had no idea what that was. And I think I got into studying accounting because that was the recommendation. Become a chartered accountant, it's a good profession, make lots of money, etc. And so that's what I did. I got a bursary from a...
You don't make lots of money being an accountant. I didn't make the switch. Did you do accountancy? Did you actually do accountancy?
Yeah, so I got a bursary from an auditing firm, and I studied accounting, and I took all the subjects to be a chartered accountant. And then I finished my degree and I said, I don't want to do this. When you get when you get a bursary, you got to go and study during the holidays. Not study, go work in the holidays. And I was working doing accounting and I hated it. I found it so boring. I didn't see the point of it. I honestly didn't see. And I just thought, I can't do this. And so it was a very expensive decision. I had to repay my whole bursary. They wanted the money very quickly. And I went back and studied economics.
So you did go back and study economics.
Yeah, and it was, and when I think about it now, it was, thank goodness I did that, because I'm just not cut out to be in accounting, not at all.
I have to share those sentiments, because the day that I finished the article, the very next day I actually started on the stock exchange. And my one regret, and I say that openly, was that I never studied economics. I loved economics. I'm going to go away from economics for the meantime, because this whole show is about you, the personality. And it's interesting reading about you. There are two aspects that attract me. Number one, you're a photographer, and a well-regarded or well-known photographer. And the other is a horologist. Now, what is a horologist? What does that mean?
You've got to say that very carefully,
horologist. Is that the way, am I pronouncing it the right way?
That's right, yeah. So a horologist is basically somebody who works on watches. And that's what I did. I love watches. I've actually still got my very first watch that I ever got. I was 6 years old and I got a watch. I've kept it. My brother he got a watch at the same time, and I found him outside. I remember this now. I'm 6 years old, right? And I found him outside digging in a sand pit, burying his watch. And I was thinking, why are you burying your watch? Anyway, I've still got my first watch, and I collect watches. And then a few years ago...
Did you undo that watch? Did
no,
you say one day in the back office, just take out the screws and say, well, how does this work?
No, I didn't do that. I just loved the look of it. If I walk past a watch store, I just have to look. They all just look so nice.
But I assume you're not into the digital watches. You're more into the actual mechanism that... Yeah. So it's the craftsman behind that.
That's right. So I'm not a digital fan. I mean, obviously they're very good, etc. But I prefer a mechanical watch, preferably an automatic watch. And I decided, well, I need to learn how to do this. And in my head, I thought, so how hard can it be? That sort of notion. And so I did some courses online in the US. There are three levels of courses. Tried to learn a bit, and then started to practice. I made lots of mistakes, cost me a fortune, because each part you destroy, you got to reorder it. The whole lot's imported, and the goal was, I want to make my own watch. I want to have my own watch brand, not to make a huge amount of money from it, not to go into watches as a profession, just out of a hobby, just out of interest.
What can you do different that's not there already?
It's just, for me, I looked at watches and I said, I need this thing to be much simpler. I want when watches became in my mind way too complicated. When I look at the dial, I'm thinking, just tell me the time. They've got all kinds of sub-dials, and people never use it. It looks impressive, right? And it's got all the push buttons and stuff. And I thought, no, I just wanted to tell the time. And so I looked around and I thought there aren't watches that are really simple. If you go back years, they used to make watches, which we now regard as a classic. And I thought, no, that's what I want. I want to make a really simple watch that when people look at it, they know in your face, this is the time. And that's what I set out to do.
Wayne McCurry was telling me a story the other day. He got into an old Jag and the time was wrong. He says, so all he did is pulled out a button and turned it to the correct time instead of trying to fiddle with the computer trying to get the right time. Kevin, but how does, let's think about this in terms of a company like Richemont. I mean, it's a highly, it's a craft that I think is passed on from generation to generation, the actual making of timepieces.
Yeah.
Do you think, I mean, using your knowledge, do you think like a company like Richemont or Swatch or any of these major Swiss companies, will they be able to keep up with demand that will come from places like China, you know, for these very highly crafted watches?
Look, I actually think so, because you must remember that there's a phenomenal amount that goes into the design of the watch. And if I look at, so I'm designing the face of the watch, I'm designing the look of the watch, I'm not designing the mechanics of the watch.
Okay.
I wouldn't have that capability at all. So in terms of the mechanics of the watch, all I'm doing is buying the parts. And then I'm getting a diagram I print off the internet that says, put this part into this part, and I assemble it. And I think where the expertise, where the true expertise is in the guy that can make the design of the next watch and make it more efficient or make it somehow a better power reserve, etc. And that's where they...
When was the first watch made? When was the first modern watch that we know that actually kept time? How long ago is that?
Oh, over 100 years ago. And they've just simply been developing and developing. But the truth is that most of the mechanical movements that you know now, those were developed in the 50s. We just simply take that as a base unit, think of it as a base unit, and then they just tweak it. And over time, it's not like they all sit and completely revamp the mechanism. They keep the base unit, the base design, and they just tweak it. And so it becomes a little bit more efficient. They use better parts. You know, because a watch is hugely affected by weather, it's hugely affected by magnetism. All of those things over time play a big role.
And photography? Do you specialize in an area? Or
mostly wildlife. Being in South
too.
Africa, it's fairly obvious. I actually tried to, you know what, I tried to take pictures of buildings because I thought that's and you know how much trouble you get to in South Africa, you start to take pictures of buildings. And people are just, I found that people mostly are uncomfortable in front of a camera, and it's very difficult to get somebody to really relax. So to me, wildlife is a natural focus.
Kevin, we're going to run out of time. I mean, and that's unfortunate because I think those subjects to me are far more interesting than economics. But you did write a book called The Missing Piece, where you address structural issues in South Africa. What's missing? What is the missing piece, and what do we need to do to get this country right?
The main thing is that we need to encourage business a lot more. I mean, it sounds very simple, and it is simple. We tend to overcomplicate stuff, and we overcomplicate economics in this country. Actually, everywhere we overcomplicate. We just need to encourage business. Business in South Africa sits as South Africa's single biggest asset. Great expertise, most companies fairly well managed, great balance sheets, and they know the right thing to do. But business is feeling reluctant, feeling lacking confidence, and not willing to unlock that balance sheet to make it work harder. And when you look at employment, it's very obvious that private sector employment is stagnating, government employment has soared. You can't keep that up. You've got to encourage private sector employment, and business are the only people that can unlock that. So to me, if you had to pick one single ingredient, it's business confidence. And I look at the recent election in India, and they've elected a guy who's pro-business, who's starting to stamp out corruption, starting to promote investment. And suddenly, everybody's interested in India. Suddenly, the currency's doing better. Business confidence has soared. Investment plans are being made. It literally just requires embracing the business sector.
Does it need a change of government or government thought?
Political will. It needs a change in political will.
And do you think, I mean, do you think we're on the wrong tracks? Particularly now, you've got NUMSA breaking away from COSATU, which in my mind suggests that the that it's moving more left than right.
That's right. So at the moment, we've got all kinds of politics that take us away from the real issue. Quite frankly, none of the politics that we're involved in now will lead to job creation. It's all about political infighting, and it's all distracting us from the real issue, and that is, how do you build the country, how do you invest, how do you employ people? And I think that while this infighting, whether it's in NUMSA, whether it's between EFF and ANC, and the mess-ups in Parliament, while that's all going on, in the background, our single biggest asset is becoming despondent, which is the business sector. And I think we need to change the political will and focus on the business sector and say, we really need you, we're embracing this, we want you to make a positive difference.
How do you do it? I mean, we want to do it. Yeah. I think there is the will to do it. Somehow we feel we're just hitting obstacles all the way. Is there a single factor that can take place that can swing it around before business moves out and in what I call the Great Trek, or emigrates?
So that's right. So at the moment, business is looking increasingly, business is investing, just not in South Africa, increasingly in the rest of Africa and elsewhere. And quite frankly, if you look at those listed companies, take Aspen, Steinhoff, MTN, all done very well in moving offshore, and I think more guys will do it. So we've got a short time to try and turn this around. And I think it requires that the most senior management within politics, your cabinet ministers, all uniformly recognize the role of business in society, and that you can't govern and run this country by saying government must be involved in all decision making, government must be the owner of all assets, government must determine all things that go on. I think government is trying to have too much control. To me, government should focus on what is it that they really want to change, what is it that they can influence and change, and step away from the rest and welcome a private sector involvement. And you know, the strange thing is that if you go look at our policy, the National Development Plan, it actually says that. It says we need business. It says we need small business. We need to follow through in terms of making that policy just more real in how the cabinet ministers, from the president all the way down, embrace the business sector.
Do we have the structures to actually make it work? You know, are they still in place?
To me, they're still in place. The institutional capacity in this country is actually quite strong. And if I look at the key institutions, Reserve Bank, the National Treasury, if I look at a place like Transnet, we've got actually those capabilities. I just don't think that we directing them properly. And I think we've got different parts of government working in opposite directions. So I don't think we've lost the institutional capacity completely. We've still got the rule of law, we've still got the great constitution, all of those are great. We're not focusing on the real issue. The real issue is create jobs and get private sector to create those jobs.
Kevin, my timepiece says we've run out. Yeah? I can't read it properly as well because it's in Roman numerals, and I still haven't quite got the hang of it. Kevin, it's been wonderful being with you. Thanks for giving up your time. I know you're missing out on a party next door. We can hear them so raucously there as you give a feedback on how they've done over the year. You've been on the couch with David Shapiro and Kevin Lings.